All right, folks, this one's going to be rough and ready. Welcome back to That So Second Millennium bonus episode on 3 works that I promised a student to read as a tide-you-over for the Papal Name podcast series, which I swear to God I will get back to with God's help. I'm in a time of great transition again. We'll see if I have learned from my mistakes and my experiences. But for tonight, I'm just going to, however much mucus I have, try to get through this because I read these books months ago now, and I have no desire to let them rot any further on the vine. So hopefully Bill and I will get back in the saddle and discuss the Pope's name Sixtus here. I'm hoping by the end of August. Let's just say that. But for the moment, all right. So Fathers and Sons was the one I decided to tackle first. So. And this one, I have to confess, I did not, and I am glad I did not, try to read or listen to an audiobook of the entire tedious thing, because I don't know, maybe it would have surprised me, but I started the book, read a few chapters into it, and then looked up a audiobook dramatization. There was a play adaptation. It was actually done by a theater group in Los Angeles. So that was what I listened to. I don't feel the lack. Partly because I'm more familiar. I strongly suspect. I would be interested. I hope I could talk to the student about it at some point because she went and decided to get married. So she's clearly she's just completely off the rails, and who knows when she'll get this assignment done. But in any case, she's not getting it done this summer. That's clear. So I suspect, though, that from the viewpoint of your standard Wyoming Catholic student, they do not have the same historical and political background information that I do. And so going through this at length might be good to sort of, hammer it into their brains what the 19th century intellectual world was like. Whereas I strongly suspect I don't really need that. Because these people are tedious. These people are naive in a very 19th century sort of way. I have taken in my own head sarcastically to calling the 18th century the Great Endarkenment, because Western culture did its best to forget all kinds of extremely important things that it had spent many centuries gathering, and then in a fit of adolescent fury at the hypocrisy of itself, of its parents, so to speak, Western civilization, dropped the pilot and, forgot Aristotle, forgot all the Catholic fathers, forgot the scholastics, rebelled against them, threw everything away, and then tried to start everything over again. I have a time or two alluded to Fulton Sheen's book, Piece of Soul, where he says something rather similar about the 20th century, picking up stuff from the wastebasket, and uncrumpling it and pretending that it's its own discovery, in the realm of psychology. But in any case, so this is the characters in the book are in the grip of just absolutely febrile political, this whole nihilism movement. Like, yes, as a matter of fact, when I was a kid, roaming, chewing through, early to mid 20th century history books, there was a lot of discussion of, nihilists throwing bombs at czars. Yes, that was a thing. Yes, that was a thing. You don't need to remind me that was a thing. You don't really need to remind me that this led to, when I grew up, the Bolsheviks were still in charge. Kids. I know you all don't get that anymore. It's not the same world. So that's my takeaway, is that probably for them it's better. Oh, and then there's the whole proto-sexual revolution crap going on in this book. It's delightful. I mean, this is not to say it's not a good book. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that I don't need the themes rehashed in this way. I mean, at the time the book was written, they probably needed to be hashed and rehashed some. And I think for Wyoming Catholic students, tittering in the hallways when they're freshmen reading Aristophanes, and then they come and read Fathers and Sons and, the kind of ridiculous squalor of interpersonal relationships going on in that book. They probably need it. And then certainly, I don't regret going through it at something more than a Cliff Notes pace. But it's not something I necessarily felt the need to be knocked down and dragged out to complete depth. And then there's, Paradise Lost. So this was kind of a hybrid. I listened to, I want to say, the first 10 books, maybe the first 9 books, while I was on a long road trip, which I've been on a lot of, and then read the last 2 or 3 in person. And of course, this is Paradise Lost. Okay, yes, this is a masterwork of the English language. Yes, Milton, as much of a giant, hilariously arrogant jerk as he was, this was one of the great works, and it's embarrassing that I got to the age 47 before I read it. So, and of course, a lot of this is stuff that I had heard about it, and now that I've read the poem, I get to luxuriate in the actual reality of it. But Satan as tragic hero, yes. That's a fascinating thing to read. This is and of course a tell for Milton's own spiritual condition. Yeah, could buy that. Would buy that. Definitely am buying that. Yes. I'm long on that. It's also, and this is something that C.S. Lewis prepared me for with The Discarded Image. And now to actually have read this, Milton was clearly out of his depth in terms of, shall we say, natural philosophy. I do not believe he was up to the task of trying to digest this rapidly changing, heinously confusing situation that he was living in. I mean, in the 17th century, the whole Galileo thing, right, is in that century. It's a debated point, right? Does it make sense to say that the sun is, the thing that all the other planets revolve around? People are still arguing about this, okay? So, and then to read, so I don't, Milton is not putting forward anything that has, a candidate to being an intellectual candidate to have been the best read that someone could have put on the evidence at that point, which is fine. He's just not that any more than I'm going to pick up, the book of Joshua and try to learn astronomy from it either. But what Milton does do with it, this fascinating and again, this is specifically what Lewis prepared me for. Lewis prepared me for, the medieval world was anchored. The earth is the center, we're walking around on it, everything's just the way it appears to be. And then there are these lights in the sky, and they're circling around, and they're doing their thing, and they're very organized. And in particular, Lewis emphasizes the entire cosmos is light for these people. It's not, we picture it as dark. And of course, we have reason to picture it as dark. And it's very terrifying. And it's a complete, mental paradigm shift. So Milton is in this, his Satan makes this, odyssey, obviously, across, chaos. And he can do this weird mingling of mythological figures and, Jewish/Christian figures and then just this, and the earth is just in this bead, in this jewel dangling in space. And that, that was Lewis's final point. Milton is the first poet, I believe he said, that, where, the cosmos is terrifying and the earth is just kind of out here somewhere. And we're just spinning around, floating around. It's really weird. And it's disorienting. And, as someone who's, certainly experienced the odd delusion of is the earth going to fall into the sun? Is the moon going to fall into the earth? What keeps it all up there anyway? It was very poignant for me. And then that, and takes that whole, Satan on his hero's journey to wreak vengeance on God, and then of course when we're hearing the whole story of the Because Milton starts as a media res, and of course I'm reading this and I'm thinking, well, that was a nice trick, discarding, sidestepping any responsibility to tell us why Satan rebelled. Okay, so that's not true. You read the rest of the book and you realize, okay, he's really just doing the classical thing. He really is starting in media res, and then we go back and catch that part. Okay, fair enough, absolutely. No, I'm sorry I doubted you, Milton. I'm sorry I doubted you. But again, the tell for Milton's own, political and spiritual condition. It's very interesting. Very interesting. That whole trying to, where is Milton? I mean, he's struggling to I know I shouldn't be on Satan's side, but he gives him such, delightfully plausible arguments sometimes. He's too good at it. He's too good at it. And then, of course, the horrible part about it is that, and then he drops the pilot. Again, that's going to be the phrase that I overuse in this podcast. But, okay, so Satan, tragic hero. But, we just sort of transition. And then there's that bizarre thing with the apples and the ashy apples and the demons all turning into snakes and eating them. That was super awkward, man. And then that's it. And we don't go back to him. And he's clearly the hero of the piece. And then we just have this really lame, Milton summing up the rest of Scripture. And he's not that good at that. He does not do that in a compelling fashion. So it's very uneven in that sense. But to circle back, one thing I wrote at the end of my notes here, but that whole, to circle back to how he's playing with mythological images and just, doing, this fascinating job of depicting Satan and everyone and everything around him. So the image of sin as a nightmare version of, okay, it's obviously Athena rising out of his forehead. And then death as Athena's child that's this giant bloody thing with a dart that could even destroy Satan. And then the idea that the two of them, mostly the giant, will be used to plug up the mouth of hell at the end of time. It's just, it's fascinating. Fascinating image. Okay, Paradise Lost. Masterwork of English literature. Stupid of me to wait this long to read it, but there you go. All right, Crime and Punishment. Ooh, boy, talk about difficult stuff to read. But this I did read. I read it. I immersed myself in it. I forced myself through it. Because that's the thing about Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky is he's good for you. He's good medicine. He's teaching me. Up until 2020, in 2020, I listened to an audiobook as probably bled over Christmas into 2021. Great time for it, right? When COVID was going around, and in the winter. But I listened to the audiobook of The Brothers Karamazov, which of course takes a very long time. And just, oh my gosh, Dostoevsky is... Where are these characters going? Why are they doing or saying any of the things that they're doing or saying? I don't get it. Is there a plot somewhere? Kind of. And yet it is so poignant. And yet it is so, moving and disturbing and disquieting and all those things that obviously Dostoevsky was put on earth to be. And so Crime and Punishment. Oh my gosh, could there have been more insane, people talking past each other, innuendo that only exists in Dostoevsky's brain? How am I supposed to get this reference? What's he doing this for? Why is he doing it? I mean, and yet at the same time, it's how much of this do I sympathize with, right? The utter alienation of modern man from his world. So up until I'd read, when I was past 40 already in 2020, reading The Brothers K. So I had read notes from Underground in undergrad. That was the extent of my Dostoevsky. Not, if you're going to condense Dostoevsky down to, reading that short, I mean, you could do worse, right? But, that whole... just explode that and turn it into a narrative and, oh my gosh, all of this insanity. But the utter alienation of modern man from his world, from his fellows, from himself. He obviously, Raskolnikov, obviously, like, he is so, schizophrenic in that sense of he is separated from himself. Who knows which Raskolnikov you're going to get from one scene to the next? He doesn't know. He has no control over it. Yeah, and so, of course, then how can he have relationships with people? How can he have a stable sense of his place in the world? He doesn't. He can't. And so he makes this grandiose plan. Part of him, the Mr. Hyde version of him makes this plan. Surprised that the late 19th century produced that piece of literature as well, eh? But, he makes he agonizes over it. He goes back and forth. He forgets it for stretches of time. And then he just impulsively does it. Or rather, he does the crux of it. And then, complete moral, psychological, emotional collapse in the middle of it. And he follows through on nothing. None of the actual point of it. He just murders someone. And then he accidentally, impulsively murders her sister when she blunders in at an inconvenient time. And then he does nothing of what he planned to do with it. He does not take her, wealth and set himself up and start the revolution, whatever the heck he thought he was going to do, comparing himself to Napoleon and everything. He does none of that crap. He completely, immediately, utterly loses, yeah. And do I sympathize? Oh my gosh, do I sympathize with that? I've never murdered anyone. But, that whole, toying with drastic action, never carrying it out. Or if I do carry it out, then just, then falling flat on my face. Oh my gosh, it's just so, it's too painful. It's too close. And then, okay, so, that's the story, right? That's the whole story. You dance around all these other characters and the insane, fallen noblewoman and her, and her daughter who's forced to turn to prostitution and that whole, extremely sad, sweet drama there. And then everything with Raskolnikov's own family and, what's his name? The other R guy ends up marrying his sister. Yeah, that guy. All that other drama is just circled around Raskolnikov being schizophrenic and, spiritually completely, splintered into pieces that barely talk to each other. But then there's that ending, there's that denouement, right? He's out in Siberia, and then Dostoevsky just throws in the towel. He just absolutely, literally, explicitly throws in the towel. I have no more to write. I can't write this. I'm not the guy to write this for you. I can't possibly write a story of... And of course, isn't that hard? Because what's Raskolnikov actually going to have to do? He's going to have to patiently, slowly, day by day, piece by piece, unglamorous bit by unglamorous bit, no drastic decisions here, no acts of, no more acts of sudden violence, no more, grand gestures, positive or negative. He's just going to have to day by day, patiently, do what it takes, talk to people, come out of his shell, learn from his mistakes very slowly, one day at a time. And man, that doesn't make a good novel. That's hard to turn into a good novel. And yet it's what we need. It's what we need every day. And maybe that's why I'm not as far along as I could be, because I have a novelist at heart myself. So, all right, that is that. And I hope I get to talk to M. She's a sweet girl. She's crazy. She comes by honestly. I know her dad. So hopefully I'll get to discuss these books with her at some point. But I hope you didn't mind my taking the opportunity to discuss them with you. Hope it was slightly enjoyable. And we will talk more about Popes at some point soon. Before the end of third quarter 2026. So help me God.